welcome along to our first ever podcast series. This one is all around mental strength and how important it is for having a great performance or a better or improved performance in your events. And specifically, we're going to be relaying it more towards the longer ultra events where it becomes really crucial to be mentally strong, to be able to get anywhere near your goal. You know, I think this is as important as the actual training element, which is often neglected. And it's definitely something that the professional and elite sports people practice and work on in all fields of sport. But obviously, myself as a professional trail runner, it's something that I do directly in relation to my running. So over the next few episodes, we'd love to get your feedback on what we've been talking about and if you feel that it's something that you're going to be able to employ and use. But today I'm really excited to be joined by Associate Professor Dr Andrew Gardner. Andrew's going to be joining us on this series of mental strength podcasts over the coming weeks, and we hope to put together 6 episodes, the 6 key areas that I think are really going to help runners. So, Andrew, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Vlad. Thanks for having me. I am a clinical neuropsychologist, which is a person that's expert in cognition and thinking skills. My area of interest over my career has been in sports-related concussion, so I've worked with a lot of elite-level athletes in terms of diagnosing and managing concussion. But I also have a very significant interest in mental performance. And so I've worked with a number of elite level athletes on their mental game and trying to help them improve not only from a physical and technique perspective, but also from a mental skills perspective. And so I've had an opportunity to work with a number of elite level athletes. I have an exciting prospect that I can't announce just yet about working with a professional team for the upcoming season, which is going to be exciting. And then just also working with a number of runners in your group, which has been fantastic to really work over the past few months with those guys.
So Andrew's referring to Run Lab. So Run Lab is our on-the-grounds training groups that we have in the Hunter region and in Sydney, in Australia. So it enables me to coach and have a team of coaches that train runners to essentially achieve their impossible, and we do focus on trail running. But we've also then got our online Pro Trail Runner platform, which is bringing these skills and programs to people all around the world. And I guess I've been blessed that this year, due to COVID, Andrew actually was able to join Run Lab for the first time because you haven't been able to travel as much as you normally would. So most of the time you'd be flying backwards and forwards between here and the United States.
Yeah, US mostly, in Europe.
So all of our travel got cancelled. Andrew was able to take up an online offering that we did. And it was almost instantly that I think I received an email either when Andrew was joining or not long after joining, where I was like, this guy's asking some questions that no one's really ever asked me, and I could just tell that you had a background in something. And then obviously we started talking, you started doing a few of the sessions, and then very quickly I found out that you had this amazing background. I was like, wow, that's cool. I'm going to reach out to Andrew and see if he can assist me in putting something together for our runners. And then it's just gone from there. And I guess the other exciting thing is that you're training for your first ever ultra, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're training for a race called the UTA 100, which is a 100 kilometre race next May in the Blue Mountains in Australia. It's a brutal run, one that I've actually not finished myself. I DNF'd last year. I had an ankle injury which stopped my race in its tracks at about 60 kilometres when I was leading. So I have unfinished business there. I know how tough that race is. And you're training for your first one. Yeah.
I'm blissfully unaware about how hard it's going to be, but I'm going to work hard.
That's right. And I'm going to do my best to make sure I prepare you and give you the strategies to implement to get you to that line as best as you can, and give you the most success, the biggest chance of success in achieving your goal. And your goal is?
I would like to get in under 14 hours to get that silver buckle, but we'll see how it goes. Work hard.
So it's an ambitious goal, but the fact that Andrew's stating that right from the outset is one of the traits that I know is important to people that are prepared and mentally strong. Actually, like just putting down a goal and committing to it is a big start of the journey, and now you can work towards that. So we'll check in a couple of weeks and see how your training's going. Yeah. But for now, I do know that you're doing some training with Run Lab. Yep. Did a strength session last night, and hopefully you get a little bit sore later on today. But anyway, we wanted to dive into our first topic, and we're going to be talking about the self-image guys. So we're going to be talking about the self-image, how important it is to you in terms of your running events, but also some of the techniques and strategies that you can employ to actually grow it. So Andrew, do you want to discuss briefly the self-image?
Yeah, so the self-image is an extremely important aspect of our entire life, and we're talking about it in the context of running in this podcast, but it really applies to every area of your life. And it can be a limiting factor, but it also can be a very advantageous thing to have a really good, strong self-image. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the self-image, it's really built up of your habits and behaviors. So the belief system that you have, how you train in terms of running, and so that's the behaviors and the belief system. So it's really all about how an athlete thinks, how an athlete trains, and what an athlete writes down and believes in terms of their training program. Yeah. So we go through a process of growing the self-image or shrinking the self-image. Every single activity that we're involved in has the potential to grow or shrink our self-image. Mm-hmm. So we need to have the correct imprints and to be processing various things that happen to us in life and in our training sessions or in a race appropriately so that we are growing that self-image as opposed to shrinking it. And we can go into more details there, but I wanted to just ask you a few questions to start with. So in terms of when you first started your running career, how do you feel like your self-image was back then compared to what it is now, and how it's grown over time?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, and really I've been training at an elite level for over 15 years, and through various sports, but mainly all around running. I did a bit of triathlon in there. And I realised pretty quickly, being the type of person that I am in wanting to achieve success, it wasn't good enough just to kind of float along and do what everyone else was doing. And I always was trying to do extra things or things that other people weren't doing to give myself the best chance of performing well. And that might have meant, being really careful in terms of recording like how I was going in my sessions, capturing data. One thing that I did do was I would often ask many people, the same types of people, the same types of questions. Like, I'd seek out different coaches, and even though I knew I was nowhere near that level, I would throw myself out and say, for example, when I was doing triathlon, I reached out to who I thought was the number one triathlon coach in Australia, just sent him an email and was like, I want to be as good as that guy that you're coaching who was the current world champion, I think. Is there any chance that I can come and do some training sessions with you guys and that type of thing? And I mean, it's something that no one else would do. And sure, I didn't doubt my ability or the fact that I had a massive work ethic, and that I knew that if somebody gave me the chance, I would just be able to, I'd prove my capability to them, and that I wasn't wasting their time. And so I think being like that and always looking to improve, I just built on all the positive things that I was doing, and I was very rapidly getting better and better and better. And I started off, running and doing triathlon and running in kind of social groups, but very quickly I was drifting towards being in select elite groups surrounded by the best. Being able to do even just a part of a session with those kind of people that were seen to be the best or leaders was just filling me with confidence. And if I look back on it now, I think that was all part of growing my self-image, giving me that confidence and belief. I went and did a training camp with Peter Robinson, who was triple world triathlon champion, and nowhere near as good as him in triathlon, but I'm definitely better than him now in running, or I got to that point. And so it's important, but I think the best thing now is that for all of you guys that are looking to achieve a great result, you can start thinking about this right now, and very quickly you'll be able to put some strategies in place to help you on an accelerated journey as compared to what I had myself.
Yeah, I think some of the points that you just made there, if I just summarize some of the things, was you sought out an environment that would help you grow. Yep. And that's a growth mindset right there, straight away, trying to look for areas that can improve. The environment that you then hung around was an enriching environment, which helped you grow even further. Yep. And you were not comparing yourself to people that were there, but you could see, if I train as hard as my work ethic is, and I can see what the product of that is in all of the runners that I'm hanging around with who have been doing this for a long time, I can easily grow to be as good as them because I'll have the foundation set of what I've been doing so far. I go through the training programs with the elite level people, and I have the capacity and capabilities of reaching that stage. So you've gone from having the positive mindset of, yes, this is the goal that I want to achieve. Here's my strategy, because life's a strategy game.
Yeah.
We go through strategies. Here's my strategy for being equally as good as these guys. And by hanging around the guys, it just helps you grow even further as well, because your environment and having a really enriched environment is really important. And we'll talk about those environmental imprints shortly.
And don't get me wrong, I mean, I know what it's like to throw yourself into a foreign environment or to go somewhere where you kind of maybe have a little bit of self-doubt as to, do you really belong there? And so, yeah, it was a little bit intimidating and challenging, but it was like, you know what, like I really wanted something. 9 times out of 10, it worked out for the better by just going and seeking out and training in those.
So what we're talking about here is Vlad's experience, and it's an N of 1, which we call anecdotal evidence. But when we start to collect a number of people that have the same kind of experience, and we call it a case series, it's a little higher level of evidence in terms of our scientific levels of evidence. And so some of the elite level people I've worked with, and because you hang around that area a lot, you hear a lot about other different stories, and you hear in the media people that are seeking things out like what you did. And one of the attitudes that they have is that they don't have an attitude of entitlement. They're there every day to earn their right to be there. Yeah. And that, along with good work ethic and an attitude of gratitude and pushing through to try and demonstrate that you deserve to be there, just empowers you to continue to strive and stretch and reach those goals as well. So I think that's something that probably a lot of people take for granted, and a lot of people listening to this podcast may not have picked up on when you're talking about that. It was you that sought that out. You got in that environment, and even though initially you were like, hang on, do I belong here? I'm going to prove myself every day. Yeah. That helped you grow exponentially rather than be on a slow and kind of plateau out. So that's really good and important too.
And and just, it's so important to have that open mindset and the want to improve, but also to do your best. And, because I see it in our sessions, in our on-the-ground sessions, and the people that I coach, there's always a couple of people that, seem to be, before they even start the session, they're kind of putting self-doubt or putting the brakes on in terms of what they're going to be able to achieve that session. And, I've seen people eventually over time remove that and really rapidly start improving. But you have to, bad session or a bad set or a bad interval, you need to think about the reasons for that and then put something in place so that next time, it doesn't happen again. And so you create a positive out of a negative. Yep. And there's reasons why we have bad run sessions or bad days. You might be tired, you might have been in a big week, you might have been carrying a niggle, you might have been a little bit unwell, but you've got to process that and move on. And also when you do those runs where you do hit the goals that your coaches are setting for you as an example, that you take that self-growth, learning from that.
Absolutely. And what you're referring to there is really that reinforcement. So there's that imprinting, making sure that we are trying to improve what we're writing down in our training logs.
So let's talk about those. Yeah, let's talk about those imprints a little bit more, because I know there's specifically 3 different types of imprints that leaders in the field in terms of mental strength talk about. Let's just define each one of those for the guys that are listening and have a little bit more of a delve into them. So do you want to kick off with the first one?
Yeah, sure. So we've got actual imprints is the first one. I'll just give you a summary of the other ones as well though. So we've got the environmental imprint is our second one. Yep. And then our third one is the imagined imprints.
That's my favourite one, but we'll come back to that a little bit later.
Yeah, so in terms of the actual imprints, it's really what happens in your experience. So let's talk about a training session. You're doing hill repeats and you've been able to, in the past weeks and in your past training sessions, been able to do 10 repeats on this particular hill that you've done a number of times, whether it be with a group or individually. And the training session tonight or this afternoon or this morning is that we're going to do 15 hill repeats, and you've never done that before. you may be apprehensive, you may be concerned, but you may also be, okay, I'm going to take the first few a little easy, so I'll make sure that I get through those end 5 that I've never done before. But in the end, you get through those 15.
Yeah.
So you've actually done better than you've ever done before, which is an opportunity to grow your self-image, to say, okay, well, no, I'm not a 10 rep hill repeat person. I'm a 15, or I could be even better. So that gives you a chance to grow. Now, what happens if the opposite happens? So something happens and you miss a couple of reps because you don't feel like you can back up. The rest of the group does it and comes back, and then you join in that next rep. So you might get 12 or 13. You can still grow that self-image. What happens if you do a little bit worse and you don't even make the 10 that you usually get? There's an opportunity there that you could potentially shrink your self-image if you don't imprint that experience correctly. And we want to make sure that we're not imprinting actual events that will shrink that self-image.
So in that case, let's say that you only got through 8 and you're supposed to, and you know that you can do 10 because you've done it before many times, and today you were trying to do 15, that person that, I can imagine, just imagining out loud, thinking out loud myself now, you could probably see that person looking a little bit down at that point of time as a coach. What would you be saying to them to make sure that they turn that around?
Yeah. So in terms of the reinforcements and the encouragement of reinforcement, is that we just work out what the issue was for them not to achieve it. So it might have been a huge training load before they got to that particular session. It might be that they didn't have a great day at work and didn't hydrate and eat well. It may be that they have a little niggle and it just flared up when they were going through things. Yeah. So all of these different reasons why that could have been is external to their self-image. So there's a reason for why that happened. Yeah. You acknowledge that reason, you work on how to have that reason not happen again. Yeah. And then you can move forward. But it's not about saying, okay, well, I'm not good enough or I can't do this. Because if you say those kinds of things, so there's some research that's been conducted that shows you that if you say, I can't, or actually if you say I won't, 10% of the time you're going to be successful. If you say I can't, it's around about 40%. If you say I think I can, it then jumps up to 60%. But if you go through and say I can, it's 80%. And then once you actually achieve it, it's up to 96, 95, 96% of the time that you can do it. So the attitude and the belief behind your things that you're trying to target, so whether it be that 15 rep, is going to have a huge impact on the success that you will have. So that's one of the ways of trying to reinforce that. But what we really need to do is to make sure that we're not making it our core belief about ourselves is the reason why we failed. Yeah. But if we're successful, then it needs to be an opportunity to say, okay, I am now somebody that can do 15 reps and or more. Yeah. And continue to have that growth mindset and say, okay, well, if I can do 15 now, if I keep working hard, I'll be able to do 20 at some point, or I'll be able to do X, Y, Z. I'll be able to do the 100.
And these are all things that, if you are growing in your training year, you're just putting yourself in a much stronger position come goal events to have a really positive outcome.
Yeah, and once again, and I've said this just before, but life is really a strategy game. It's not a talent game. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later in another podcast.
We are, yeah.
Although we're making these podcasts separate and different topics, they really are not mutually exclusive, which means that they don't just stand alone. They are very, very intertwined. Crossover. So we might talk about a few different topics and bring it in on the various podcasts and kind of bring it all together.
Awesome. So that's one of the imprints. The second one is environmental.
We'll go with imagined imprints first. Yeah. So one of the really big things that the brain is so good at doing is to imagine certain things or imagine events. So we talk about mental imagery in terms of you might go through your entire race and play it over in your head multiple times before you actually go out and do it. One of the examples I'd like to use is an elite level world champion lawn bowler who I had the pleasure of working with in terms of playing with him, because I was at that level many years ago. And he was the world singles champion, and he was asked after the world singles event, which he won with his last bowl. So if he didn't make the shot, he would have lost the world title, and he won it with his last bowl. And he got interviewed after the game, and they said, "Oh, how did you feel under so much pressure to play that last bowl? That was just amazing." And he basically said, it wasn't a big deal to me. I've played that bowl 1,000 times in my head. And they're like, what do you mean? And you say, well, I imagined having to play that very shot 1,000 times before I even got here. And it's just like, I'm just going out to execute what I've already achieved. So the brain has a great capacity. The more vivid you make those images, the more real it seems to the brain. And the brain cannot distinguish between you actually physically going out there and doing it. And if you've got a really vivid image of what you've done, the brain thinks that you've done it.
Yeah, that's so relevant, and because even in these last couple of years, in some of the races that I've done, I've just had the massive deja vu in a couple of sections of the course. It happened to me at Cape Town in South Africa last year. It also happened to me, it's happened to me a number of times where I've been, and these are races that I've never been to, some of them before, but I've got through to a certain section or something's happened and I've just like kind of almost got knocked over by the sudden rush of like, oh, I was here. And you kind of second guessing yourself. It's like, I've done this before, I've been here before, but I hadn't. And it was just this amazing feeling. But, these Imagine imprints, this is something that I've been practicing for many years without putting a label on it. And that's how I actually prepare for races myself doing this. And what I do is, in the lead up to goal races, and I know what my goal races are, 3, 6, 12 months, 18 months out, A, B and C goal races. As it gets closer to the goal races, the building on the Imagine imprints, the amount of times that I do it increases, but it also becomes more relevant to getting ready for the race. And so when I go and do the key sessions in preparation for a race, in certain parts of that run, I literally imagine that I'm in the race, and that sometimes I'll be racing and I'll have who I know is going to be at the race running beside me, imagined of course, and in my head I'll be going to myself, okay, you're holding pace, you're on form, and I'll be absorbing and creating this Imagine imprint of what it feels like to be having success and staying strong and executing my race plan, which is to run it in a certain goal time and or to win it. And it's amazing that, and I do these things have to be done by yourself. So you need to go and do these types of runs by yourself. You've got your moments where you've got your training buddies around or your group, which is essential. But there are times where if you are going to do this well, you need to be doing it by yourself. You kind of zone out and you go into this imagined, I call it like an imagined race simulation. And it doesn't have to be for long, but for example, a 40 or a 50k run, there might be periods of 2 to 3 minutes, 3 or 4 times in there where I think about being in a specific part, that I'm in this part of the race and I'm here now and what do I have to do to keep going like this. And it's amazing, your heart rate picks up and your speed picks up and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, just calm down a bit. But yeah, imagine, like if you do really imagine it, it's amazing how it just affects your physical performance without you really thinking about it. And then it's how I best prepare myself for those goal races.
Yeah, and that's really good and a great example. And again, I just reinforce what you said was that you've been doing this for a long time, but you weren't really necessarily aware of what it was that you're doing, but obviously it's been extremely successful for you. Let's talk a little bit about what happened. So that was ideal situation. Mm-hmm. What about in situations where you're preparing for things that may go wrong and how you're going to overcome that?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. One of the things that you must do and that I do, in the lead up to a race, I have something which we'll talk about in a lot more detail later on, but I think about all the things that could go wrong, and if they do happen, how would I deal with that? And specifically, I do think about sometimes when I am running, I'm probably 15, 20 minutes off the time that I wanted to get to this checkpoint. How am I going to pull that back? What am I going to do? And you actually imagine that you're in that position and you need to think about what's going to pull you out of it. You just focus on getting to that next point, which may be the next checkpoint. And at that point, you would then just calm yourself down, logically think about where you are and that, today you are doing the best that you can do. And it might be these other things that are impacting your performance for whatever reason, and you just need to be prepared for that and to modify your goals. And like, for example, when I was at Cape Town, I should have been on a podium last year in that race, and I've ended up just finishing the race in the cutoff. So I was at polar ends of what my expectation was. But I was slightly unwell from the flight over. I really badly dehydrated in the start of the run, which because I had a jacket on and the weather was so changeable, and I was kind of going off advice that other people were giving me, because you climb up really quickly, but it's not for about 2 hours that you climb up high. So I kind of had a jacket on from the start, and I just lost way too much fluid, and I was off very quickly. But you know what? I was able to pull myself together, because I had imagined that, you don't always have your perfect race. And in the end, I finished it, and I got out of it as much as I could have on that day, and that experience will live with me forever. And I actually grew from that.
And there's an example of the third one, of the environmental impact imprints that we go through as well. So that's a really good segue. But one of the things that I just wanted to reinforce here is, for the listeners, we're not saying that Vlad's being negative and thinking of all the bad things that can happen and then believing that they are going to happen. What he's doing is preparing for every situation that could potentially go wrong. When you're out on trails, even how well you've trained and how much experience you have, you still have that potential that you stand on a rock the wrong way and you roll your ankle and you go down. You need to work out how severe the potential injury is, or if you're just hurt, not injured. And then you need to work out strategies for, how do I pick myself back up and then keep going? And how do you flush that image and that problem that's going on, whether that's going to be a niggle that then lasts for the next 40 Ks or however long it is. Those are the kind of things that you need to really go through and process. What happens if you don't hydrate well, or if you keep too many layers on and you do dehydrate? What happens if you don't pick up things from a checkpoint that you're supposed to be at? What happens if you've got a crew that are working with you and you needed to stick to the schedule and they didn't quite come through for you? What happens if you grab the wrong bag when you...
Yeah. And all of those things have happened to me, and I've made those mistakes. I think I was pretty well prepared for that potentially happening, because last year in one of the races, just going to go back to another race that I did last year in Brisbane. It was the first time they ran the Brisbane Trail Ultra, 110 kilometre race, and it was really muddy, and I was leading. Then I made a navigational error, and then I was coming second. And that's the first thing that went wrong in that race, and it was definitely playing on my mind that I was now in a position that I didn't want to be in, because I was leading from the front from the start of the race. I just focused on running the best that I could. Not long after that happened, however, I got mud in my shoe, mud into my sock, which ground between my heel and the sock and the back of my shoe. And within 10 minutes, I completely ripped off the whole back of the skin off the back of my heel. And the pain was, I was trying to run on my toes, but then I started cramping. It was pouring rain. I knew I was losing time on the guy in front, but I did make the conscious decision to stop, pull the sock off, get some bandage, wrap it around my heel, and just focus on getting to the next checkpoint. And then it was quite a long way to the next checkpoint. And then I came good. Once I dealt with the pain, I was able to run fine again. I had no idea where I was in relation to the race or the guy that was now leading. I just ran to the ability, knowing that I trained really well. I was actually running really quickly again, feeling strong. And then, I got to the next checkpoint, and the guy that was leading DNF'd because he completely blew up and had a bad race. And eventually I won that race a few hours later. I could have stopped, and I know that other people would have stopped and or been really down on themselves in that situation. But being prepared for it and trusting in your ability and just dealing with it and just focusing on what I could control at that point in time meant that I finished the race really well.
Yeah, another really good point that you just made right at the end there is controlling the controllables. And we'll talk about some of those ways of green lights, yellow lights and red lights. We'll talk about those and flushing situations and just moving on and being able to progress and working out release strategies on how to move on, which is really important. But we kind of have touched on the environmental imprints without actually announcing that that's what we're talking about. So in terms of environmental imprints, which is our third and final one, it's really potentially the weather, potentially people around you and what they say, what you think about, what people are thinking about you, your thoughts about injuries, those kinds of things. So it's kind of every kind of environmental aspect of the situation in which you're in. So whether it be a race and you've got lots of fans around or lots of supporters around, and You're wondering what they're thinking about you. Am I having good form? Is this person going to take a photo of me and is it going to look bad, etc., etc.? Those are all things that you don't even need to think about. You got to control the controllables, but that's kind of environmental influences. The weather, like you said, it was raining and you got some mud in your sock. One of the examples I like to use is if you're a runner who trains in temperate or hot climates or tropical climates, and then you go along to a race where it's going to get bitterly cold and potentially running in snow, and you say, well, I'm not a snow runner, then straight away your belief system and your self-image is not going to allow you to do well there, because you've already told yourself that you're not a good runner in the snow or in the cold weather. So those are the kind of environmental factors, and you've given us some really great examples of that already.
Yeah, no, so it's been a great chat today, Andrew. And if I can just summarise it for the guys that are listening really quickly, today we've been talking about the growth mindset and how it can help you improve your performances. And it's some simple strategies that you can use, but just being aware of it, guys, will help you. And there's 3 types of imprints that you need to be aware of, and then it can work on growing. And they were the actual, the environmental, and the imagine imprints. And we're going to wrap up today's discussion, and then we're going to come back shortly and talk about our next topic. It's been a great chat, and I really appreciate your time today, Andrew, and I look forward to the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to it as well.